This is S2S Books. And today I'm here with Craig Steiner, and we're going to be having a conversation about the methodology behind Salt and Light course. And some of you would probably have heard our interview that we did several months ago on the Salt and Light course with Clyde and another brother. And that talk was, or that interview was more around kind of the high level overview of the Salt and Light course, as well as several stories about how that was used in a particular area. And today, Craig is with us to talk more about the methodology behind it and some of the ways that it can be used. So, Craig, it's good to have you here. Thank you for joining here today. Craig is from Belize, with where he and his wife and two children live. They lived there for 10 years and is serving there long term in that country. So God bless you with your work there. And then Craig also works virtually for several different organizations, and one of those is the SALT program, which is under Christian Aid Ministries, working with them in that program, which includes the SALT, includes programs all over the world, savings groups and VOTEC schools and agriculture and all kinds of things. And so, but today we're here to talk specifically about Salt and Light course, which is a Bible-based financial teaching course to help you demonstrate God's kingdom locally. It helps you discover how to become better stewards of God's resources and become actively engaged with your local community, your church, and also the youth in your church. So the Salt and Light course has 4 different tracks, which we'll be touching on a little bit later. And this course is specifically for Anabaptist churches who aspire to become trustworthy stewards of the resources that God has given them, and those who desire to share God's principles with others. So we're going to go ahead and just turn to Craig here. Craig, so obviously you were very involved with the writing of these courses, and so you have an intimate knowledge of the burden, the vision for this course. And so talk to us a little bit about what makes the Salt and Light course distinctive, maybe among other stewardship courses, and maybe you can kind of get into some of the methodology behind it, the focus, the purpose, and possibly maybe even tell us a little bit about what impacted you or what stood out to you as you were part of writing this course. So go ahead, Craig.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, this course, there are lots of courses out there that would love to tell you how to spend your money and where to give it and how to use it. And this course is more than a financial course. It's the concept of stewardship, and that everything we have belongs to God, not just our money. And it's about asking the question, how do you want me to use what you've given me? And so that's kind of the starting point. That's a foundational part of Salt and Light. And the course is, how can we use what God has given us well and to build his kingdom?
Hmm.
And so what makes this a little different than is a lot of financial courses will give you, do this and this and this and give you exact steps and a prescriptive sort of
Sure.
approach. And this is not that.
Mhm.
This course approaches it differently in we have the truth. Here's the Bible truth. And so we, in each lesson, we point that out. Here's what the Bible says. Here are the principles. And then we ask questions. God, what do you want us to do with this truth, this principle? And then we do a lot of discussion. We ask, have people discussing, well, how do we use this principle? What does it look like for you in your life? We're not saying that truth is relative, and what's truth for me isn't truth for you, but we're all at different places in life.
Mhm.
And so how I'm going to use that principle may look a little different than how you're going to use it. And
Sure.
if you make a blank statement, You give this amount to God, well, okay, well, I do that, and I'm guilt free. Off I go.
Right.
I've done my, and that's not what it's about. It's not.
Hmm.
It's constantly wrestling with the Bible principle, and here's what God says, and then how do I use this? How does God want me to use this where I'm at right now in life? And so that's one of the big things that's different about this course. You're not going to find, the prescriptive model. I've had numerous people ask me, they knew I was working on this course, and well, what about this? How should I do this? What exactly does it say about this? Well, that's not what it's necessary. I'm not telling you this is how you have to do it. You ask God, you look at those principles, and as a brotherhood, you wrestle with what does this look like? So that's one of the biggest things that makes it distinct or different.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, that's good. I taught school for a couple of years, and so you're thinking and wrestling with what is the most effective way to teach. Kind of a philosophy of teaching, if you will, or pedagogy. And um, I always remember the statement: "It's not the answer that enlightens, but it's the question."
mhm,
And the reason that statement is made is because as you get people to ask to think themselves. So
mhm,
what data do I have? What are the principles? And
mhm.
then how do I apply those? And so it's that person, each individual wrestling with those things. That's good. One of the things that stands out too about SALT in general, but also these courses, is the fact that you don't use, as I understand, a teacher student kind of paradigm.
Mhm.
Could you kind of unpack that a little bit as we're thinking about, what is it like to not only be part of a class, if you will, or a group that's going through this, but maybe even leading it? What does that look like?
Yeah, so in this course, we use the words participant and facilitator.
Hmm.
Under ideal conditions, the word teacher would would be a facilitator. An ideal teacher uses questions and gets students involved, but sometimes we get the mindset of a teacher being somebody who's up there lecturing. And so we've used the word facilitator and then participant to indicate or to capture the idea that you're not lecturing. We're learners together. And so the one leading the discussion is a facilitator. He's facilitating discussion. And the ones involved are participants. They're participating. They're not sliding into the back bench at a evening service or a meeting or a study and kind of slouching down and listening to what's happening. They're actively participating in what's happening. And so we
Hmm.
use uh, participatory learning, and we use the model that that you have the one leading and
Hmm.
everyone's involved uh,
Hmm.
for a
Hmm.
for a better learning experience. You walk
Sure.
more when using that model.
Sure. Sure. And there's several things that happen with that, as you mentioned. But one of the things I want to point out is that a lot of people can feel very incompetent to be the teacher, if you will. So, the purpose of this course is more than just, one on one. It's looking at several, a class, a number of participants, kind of working through this together. I'm not sure what the ideal size is, or you probably don't really necessarily have any uh, uh, ideal size, but I would think it work for any size. You can elaborate on that if you'd like, but what that does is it makes it more doable. You don't have to be somebody who's taught classes or a school teacher or gifted necessarily as a teacher. It's more about getting that group together and working through that, asking those questions, having more group discussion together. That's the beauty of it. And so it lowers maybe what some of the difficulty, if you will, of like having to get up front and give a 45-minute lecture. The
Mhm.
goal is, yeah, as mentioned, is participatory. And so I wanted to say that because I think a lot of people are fearful of kind of being the leader for something like this. But
Well,
whether it's a savings group, in Bangladesh, or the Salt and Light course here, it's very participant based.
exactly. And we get up front and you're the one in front, so you're supposed to have the all the answers and teach us. Well, that isn't necessarily correct.
Hmm.
Someone has said you're the guide on the side and not the sage on the stage.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Great.
You're you're the one leading the discussion, not necessarily the one with all the answers. And the courses are intended for group study. You can go through it yourself personally and wrestle with some of the questions, but the benefit is quite a bit bigger if you go through it as a group with a number of people and interpreting scripture together and applying it together.
Hmm. Sure.
Yeah. One of the other things that makes this course distinct is after you've heard a message or a lesson or something like that, what do you remember for weeks and years afterward? It's the illustrations, it's the stories, it's the lessons. And so in addition to kind of being a whole life stewardship and not necessarily prescriptive but more participatory, one of the other things that makes this course a little different is that we include a lot of activities and stories and illustrations, things that a week or two later you're going to remember. Uh,
Hmm.
Even my own children, they remember some of these stories and they can quote them back to me, a year or two later. They still remember some of these stories that I've told them. And so it illustrates the power of using some of those things to teach. And so every lesson is, it's got those elements in it to
Hmm.
to show. Probably as an example, one of them in the one track, the opening activity, it's talking about the opportunity. No, it's talking about looking at what God has given us and asking,
Hmm.
why has He given me so much, and what does He want me to do with it? And so we start out with taking 10 people out of the study group. This would assume it's in a larger setting, say like a Wednesday night Bible study if your church does those or something like that. Take 10 people, line them up in front, and split them up into a group of seven on one side and three over on the other, and then take 100 M&Ms and take 97 of those M&Ms and give it to three people, to the group of three, and then take three M&Ms and give it to the group of seven and say, here you go. And that illustrates the distribution of wealth in our world. Uh,
Wow.
it's showing the disparity. And so if you have 10,000 US dollars in assets, you're part of that group of three that's struggling to hold on to their big pile of 97 M&Ms in their hands while the other group is trying to figure out how to split three M&Ms among them. And so it illustrates the how wealth is divided, and then we stop and ask the question, well, what does God have in mind? Why is it this way? What does He want me to do? And you can extend that activity by sending the seven people out of the room where you don't see them anywhere. And that's how it typically is. We look around and we only see people with hands full of M&Ms. Anyway,
Hmm.
activities like that, we use those things to try to help us understand some of the principles and then ask, okay, what does God want us to do? What does He have in mind? And so
Hmm.
that's something else that makes this course distinct. It's not a book full of paragraph after paragraph of words. Um,
Hmm.
there are things like that to help us understand as well. That would
Hmm.
be distinctive that this course has.
Yeah, interesting. It's powerful. Yeah. So one of the next steps here for us, Craig, is kind of looking at the formats, of the lessons here that we're talking about. Um, but did you want to give any more thoughts or stories in regards to things that impacted you, or do you want to keep that for later?
One of the things in writing these lessons, one
Hmm.
of the things that these stories, affect me as well. It's not just for those doing the course later. As writers, these stories affect us. And one of the stories that affected me in writing this was we start out track C
Hmm.
with a story, and we end track C returning to that same story. Um, there we've got the book up. Track C. This is for our Anabaptist churches,
Hmm.
and we talk about Trey and Haley. And Trey and Haley, it's a true story with names changed,
Hmm.
and talks about some of the difficulties they faced in life and difficulties with finances, but with other things in life, and how one Christian family came alongside them and simply walked with them and was able to make a difference. The story doesn't end, with a fairy tale ending with everything being perfect and but that's fine, that's life. But it's a powerful story of how when we as Christians take our responsibility of stewardship seriously, and we also start to understand that it's not just a responsibility, it's an opportunity. We have a tremendous opportunity. It's not a have to, it's a want to. And the changes that can happen when we realize that the person pushing the shopping cart down the aisle at Walmart beside us might be struggling. And
Right.
maybe we have some hope and some purpose in life that they could really use. And so we have a stewardship responsibility, but we have an opportunity. And so
Hmm.
that story's in there. And there's an extension of it in track D for the youth as well with their daughter. But just a powerful example of what it
Hmm.
looks like when we start to understand really what stewardship looks like.
Hmm.
So that's exciting.
That's beautiful. A little bunny trail. Do you have Walmarts in Belize?
We don't.
Okay.
We don't.
I'm sorry. I was laughing there. I hear what you said. What did you say there?
We do not have
Okay.
Walmart here. That has to happen when we visit grandparents every once in a
Yeah.
while.
So you're contextualizing yourself to the audience here, most likely, right? Okay,
That
good.
is correct.
All right. Well, thank you for that. So let's go ahead and move into our next section here, Craig, and that is the format of the lessons. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Sure. So the lessons are divided up into a somewhat consistent pattern. There are sections that you'll have in every lesson, in every track. We start out with what we call a looking back section where it's review,
Hmm.
it's reflecting on the previous lesson. And so
Hmm.
questions and reflections, those questions are listed at the end of the previous lesson. So that if you pick and choose some of the additional topics, you can choose whatever order, whatever fits your setting. It's kind of a self-contained unit. So we prompt you to do that review, and then you just go back to whatever lesson you did previously and do the review, do the looking back section, just as a way to come back and reinforce. And sometimes there are assignments or activities to be done between lessons. And so it's going back and reflecting on what you learned there.
Hmm.
And then we start out with a from the Bible section. That's a Bible principle. That's where we start most of the time with here are some principles from the Bible. and a few questions. What does this tell us? How do we understand that?
Hmm.
And then from there, we move to what we call the big picture. And that's a real life story or some statistics or something like that that helps us to understand the principle that we're talking about in that lesson, what we're wrestling with it, something that illustrates it or helps us to understand it. And then after that, we go to the section called Life with Bill and Sarah. Bill and Sarah are fictional characters that you'll find all through the Salt and Light courses. And those stories are written to help us to kind of set up the questions. Um, one of them is dealing with children and finances. And so Bill and Sarah have Bill and Sarah's children have an uncle that gives them some money. And so then, well, what are we going to do with the children's money? Do we save it? What do we do? We give it to them. And well, we could give it to them and let them go on a shopping spree. And it kind of sets up to the question, okay, what are we going to do with this money that's been given for our children? What's the most healthy? And so then we go into questions. What would you do in a case like this? What's best? What are the pros and cons of doing it some of these different ways? And so that's the Bill and Sarah story. Sometimes if we simply tell a principle, we forget it. But if we see it illustrated in a story, it helps us to remember and understand what we're talking about. And then from
Hmm.
there, most of the lessons have an activity, something to do in groups, something to do personally, depending on what it is, an activity for you to actually use and engage with the material in the lesson. And then every lesson ends with the prompt to track income and expenses. And we do have worksheets and things in there to get you started. They're fairly simple worksheets. So some people track expenses through an app or through other methods, and that's totally fine. But the
Hmm.
goal is to encourage us to realize the power of tracking where our money's going. If someone's struggling, that's the place to start.
Hmm.
Track where it's going, and then you can look at where it's going. So we have that prompt in every lesson as well. So that's kind
Hmm.
of the format that you'll find in every lesson in each of these courses.
Hmm. That's good. Very well. I like that. So it's not only dialogue in a class, you're looking at some action items as well, some things to do.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a
or
that's
maybe
a big part of
maybe
it.
habits, leaning into the habits part, which is really powerful.
Yeah, the goal is, we can sit in a discussion in a Bible study and we listen, we hear great things, and we walk out the doors afterward and nothing changed. We have
Hmm.
we take away nothing to change. And so the goal in every lesson is while we're there to be engaged,
Hmm.
to participate, but then also when we walk out the door to have one or several things that we know we can do, an action item that we can put in practice. And it's not just, oh, yeah, we had a great study, but nothing changed.
Sure. Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, why don't we transition to the facilitator's guide, and you can kind of come back to the participant guide if you'd like here, what we
Sure.
just discussed. But the facilitator guide, you have that well done for every book. So right here we have, um, this was a participant guide. This is track A right here. A big thick book with lots of, like, as you talk about, stories and additional topics and lessons. And then this is a facilitator's guide, which again is quite thick. And and you have, in each lesson or each page, you have the accompanying page from the participant guide there. And then around the outside of that, you have some guides and ways of leading out with the class. But yeah, tell us a little more about the the facilitator guide and what's all part of this.
Sure. Each track has a participant guide. And, most of us, when we're going to lead a discussion, we feel a little more comfortable if we've got something that's just for me leading it.
Hmm.
So that's this. And so we do have the participant guide reproduced in there in an inset, but then around the side, we do have notes and helps and things for the facilitator. And so
Hmm.
possibly, for me, often when I lead a study or something, I think about all the great questions that I should have asked afterward.
Yep.
And so this, has questions to add to questions. So as you're leading out, it helps you get started with the studying. It helps you lead out with, where to go, how to lead the discussion. It does not have the answers to the questions in the participant guide. So if you're used to, participant guide has questions, go to the teacher's guide to find answers. That's not this.
Hmm.
This has some thoughts and responses to those questions. It definitely does have some of that, but it's not a fill in the blank sort of answer type of thing. It's to help you lead the discussion well, to be that guide on the side.
Hmm. Sure. Not this sage on the stage, but the guide on the side. I
Absolutely.
like
That's
that.
that's the purpose.
Hmm.
So,
And people can sense that, if we truly have that in us, that desire to be the guide on the side, not the man with all the answers, as
mm,
a way of drawing people in, and
mm,
they feel included. There's dignity with that. I'm not above you. I'm a
mm,
human just like you,
mm,
and we're going to learn together. So yeah, that that vision, that guiding principle is beautiful.
it's humility. I don't have the answers. I'm a learner just like you are. And in our own churches, that's important. Um, but as you relate to others who maybe are searching for a church or searching for answers, if we
Hmm.
come with a smugness that we've got life figured out, we've got the answers, nobody's interested in that sort of an attitude. We've got it figured out. Someday you'll be like us. Like that
Hmm.
doesn't work. And
Hmm.
so I'm a learner just like you are. I've been walking this journey for a while, and I would love to encourage you on your journey as well. It's that
Hmm.
attitude that goes far. And so that's
Hmm.
the approach that we want to take with this course. And we want facilitators to have that attitude as well, that I'm simply a learner among learners.
Hmm. Very good. Okay. So, we want to talk about our intended audience here shortly as we kind of move through this conversation. But yeah, any more thoughts you want to give here, Craig, on whether it's the participant guides or the tracks? So there's several tracks, which we'll touch on that here shortly,
Mhm.
or the facilitator guide. Any more input there?
Maybe I would just mention the format. We talked about the format of the lessons. Um, we have a foundational set of principles in each of these tracks. So we start out with some foundational principles, but then we've got about 30 lessons that come after it, and individual topics that you can pick from that whatever fits your audience. And
Hmm.
so, whether it's on debt or investing or buying a house or things like that, saving, giving, you can pick and choose from those. We have a couple of lessons on family, children. We have a few lessons on, we call them the golden years. Once we're older and thinking about retirement, some of those end of life questions are big questions, especially in the area of finances and on work. Sometimes we view work as a curse, but it's not. And and then we have a number of lessons, 6 lessons on starting a business and some of the things to think about with starting a business. And so every track
Hmm.
has that in, and those all have the same format. They all have the same stories and sections that go with, just like the foundational lessons in each book as well. So you can kind of pick and choose which lessons, which topics apply from you for your setting with wherever you're at. and they all have the same format.
Sure. Yeah, that's very interesting. Great. Okay, well, Craig, why don't we talk about the intended audience?
Sure. So these courses are intended for our Anabaptist churches um, to use in different settings. That's the target. And then we have the opportunity to take them to various settings and use them. And
Hmm.
so we've got 4 tracks, and each track has a specific purpose. And, God takes us from where we are to where he wants us to be. And so this course recognizes that. And so each of these 4 courses has a different starting point. And it approaches things because that's what God does. He meets us where we are and then takes us toward where he wants us to be.
Hmm.
So track A uh, is for those who have chronic financial difficulties. That one's got a few more lessons in. That one's got 12 foundational principle lessons. And then it's got the 30 additional topics after that yet that you can pick and choose from. And that would be for those who are payday loans, living paycheck to paycheck, just really struggling financially. Um, Track A would cover some very, very basic things like um, expense tracking and basic budgeting and things like that, just to help get those habits and disciplines started. Uh, and so that's track A. Track B would be for others around you, probably friends and neighbors and coworkers, or maybe even employees who want financial teaching. There's track B. And they want financial teaching because finances cause difficulty. They cause pain sometimes. And sometimes we're not sure what to do with them. I think finances are about the number one cause of divorce. I don't remember for sure if it's first or second, but it's very close to the top. And so it does cause difficulties in families and in marriages. And so track B is for people who would like financial teaching, but probably wouldn't set foot in your church to get it. Maybe they'd
Hmm.
be a little nervous about that, but they want, maybe you have some employees that you'd like to be able to share that with, or some friends, some neighbors. Track B starts out looking at some of that difficulty that finances can cause, and then thinking about a good way forward to some of the principles that God would have for us that help us to live well with what he's given us. So that's
Hmm.
track B. Track C then is for our own Anabaptist churches, and it has five foundational lessons, and then the 30 lessons after it. Track B and D also have 5 foundational lessons, and then the 30 after it. The 30 lessons are the same in every book. You can pick and choose what you want to study, but the 5 that start each one are different based on your starting point. And so track C looks at what God's given us. God's given us much, and asks the question, why has he given it, and what does he want us to do with it? And looks
Hmm.
at our responsibility and the opportunity that we have with what he's given us. And so that's for use in our own churches. Often, if churches have small groups, if that do a study together, if churches do a Wednesday evening Bible study as an entire church, some churches will do like a summer Bible school for adults, like a week long or a 2 week. We've had groups that have have used it there, have tested it for us in that type of a setting, and so a
Hmm.
couple different settings where that could be used
Hmm.
or has been used.
Hmm.
And then track D is for young adult, pardon me, young adult. And so that's got the 5 opening lessons, and then that's got the 30 additional topics after it. And track D looks at the what God has given us, but really focuses on the idea of opportunity. As we're young, we have our life in front of us, it looks like. And so we're asking questions like, God, what do you want me to do with my life? And how do you want me to live? And where do you want me to go? And so track D looks at stewardship from that perspective, using my resources, but also my life, and asking God, what do you want me to do with it? So that's track D, focusing on that opportunity. And here again, in all of these, it's not an idea that we've got it figured out and you don't, especially when relating to our friends and neighbors. It's the idea that we are learners with you. As you go through the activities on tracking your expenses, we're going to do it with you because we have things we can learn as well. And so it's that learner attitude in every one of these tracks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So for those who are looking at which track fits for me, sometimes that can be overwhelming. Well, what do I pick? I've got all these options here. And as you're thinking about which one to use, think about your starting point. That's the key. Where is my group starting from? And that'll tell you which track to select.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I got introduced to Salt and Light course, and then looking at these 4 different tracks, I really resonated with that perspective of where is your starting point, and then getting the track that's applicable to that. So you're tailoring it to the needs right around you. So it's really a powerful way of developing this. Um, but yeah, so I really want to bless you and your team. I know this has been a work of a lot of people, a collaboration of a lot of time of brothers there, and also with experience, with a lot of experience. So you've been kind of testing this course for North America for the last 5 or 6 years, and so you've been learning and developing it based on your feedback. And so I'm so excited to see this course made available to us. It has a ton of potential. We just need to find people who are willing to step forward and make this happen. And one thing that we didn't really talk about, we did in our last discussion with Clyde and the other brother. I'm forgetting his name now. The brother
Nelson.
from Florida, Nelson.
Yep.
Thank you. With Clyde and Nelson is, you know, how do you get people into these interested in a course? And one thing that was discussed quite a bit that maybe surface is the importance of relationship.
Mhm.
As I look at this, whether you're, track A, working with your neighbor down the street, who really is in crisis. Track B, the more the maybe blue collar person, or probably more like a lot of our neighbors that are around us, kind of here in North America, or C, local church, or D, youth. I just see relationship all across those, right? It's in that no one's being paid to come, no one's being forced to come or coerced to come. It's more of an invitation, and the way we really help put wheels to that is by focusing on relationships and connection, where people will actually want to join because they trust you, they have a relationship with you, and so I think that's maybe I don't know, that's at the heart of this, and maybe that's actually some of the part of the difficulty of this is developing those relationships where people are willing to ask those questions. Kind of a 1 Peter 3:15, when they ask of you, that hope is within you, and we can tell them, and so which speaks of relationship, it speaks of connection, and so finding those spaces to build those relationships, whether in the church or outside the church, where
Mhm.
these courses then can then be integrated, is the challenge for me, and I'm sure for you and for anyone who's thinking down this track, down
Absolutely.
this line.
And one of the things that I think it was either Clyde or Nelson mentioned, one of them I think mentioned in the past that this course is not the salt and light. Thinking of Jesus' words in Matthew 5 to be salt and light. This course isn't the salt and the light. We are. As believers, we are the salt, we are the light. And this course is a tool for us to do that. It's a tremendous tool to do that, but we can't forget, like you're mentioning, that it's the relationship that's going to, the relationship is just core, it's foundational
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
starting and in going through these courses, that the human
Hmm.
element that God has chosen to work through is important, and
Hmm.
we can't forget that.
Hmm. Good. Okay, thank you, Craig. Well, let's move into kind of wrap up here. So, what are some of the things that stood out to you? You were touching at this back at the beginning a little bit, but let's kind of end this conversation here with that. What are some of the things that challenged you, stood out to you? Some of the principles, maybe even a story or two, kind of as you work through this course.
Mhm. The Trent Haley story was a significant story for me. Just realizing that the person at the gas pump beside me, or at Walmart, they're a person as well, and they have struggles, and I have an opportunity. One of the other stories, as I was writing the lesson on employment, drudgery or joy, uh, thinking about our work and whether it's, oh, I have to go to work again. You see people that they don't want to be there, and they clock in for the pay, and that's about it. And others who are just excited about being there. And so we have a lesson thinking about that, because that's actually pretty important in stewardship. And as I went to write the big picture story for that lesson, I struggled. I want a real life story that shows this. And most of the people who are thriving in their work are quietly doing it. They're not going to have a biography written about them. They're in every corner of planet Earth, and they go to work at every day to give their best because they love God and they want to show Him to other people around them. And I ended up taking about 10 different people that I know, and I would call them heroes, people you'll never see a biography written about them, but a short description of each of these 10 people and what they do every day at work to make a difference for the kingdom of God wherever they're called. And so we highlight, and that turned out to be probably one of my favorite sections. Uh, you probably won't know these people ever. You won't see a biography, but I decided to give them a couple sentences highlighting their contribution to the kingdom of God every day at work. And that's important.
Mm. Sometimes we refer to this idea as a sacred secular divide, right? Kind of, Sunday's the sacred part, the rest of the week is the secular part. And I hear you advocating for removing that dichotomy, right? Bringing these things together, and looking at it as a divine calling. And
Absolutely.
I'm really passionate about that. I believe that those that middle of the week interaction, whether with a person from your church, or it might be working with them, or that customer or guest. For me, we have a cafe. Those are it's in the drudgery, it's in the normal that we
Mhm.
can really show forth the new humanity, and when it's
Mhm.
least expected, and really, and everyone knows it's just, a lot of us spend time making a living, and to look at that, to embrace that as an opportunity. And that's, and you're pushing on that with these tracks, You have that lesson. I think is it in every book on business, right? And kind of trying to unpack, push back against the sacred secular divide. So I really appreciate that.
If we look at, stewardship and using my time for God and sharing that with others as something
Hmm.
extra that we tack on in between the rest of our life, we get frustrated because we're busy
Hmm.
people. And yes, we need to make a specific effort and we need to dedicate time. But, it's part of our life. My work is ministry. It's mission work. Everything I do is part of my job. It's mission work. It's not
Hmm.
something that I split out for 1 day a week or a year or two of my life. It's part of my life,
Hmm.
and that's important.
Sure. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for all the work that you put into these tracks. I'm not much of a writer. You're obviously gifted more in that area, or maybe you've exercised that part of you way more than me. But I know it's hard work, and you're really developing something where there's a lot of thought being put into how you can empower people, create a platform that people can spring from and carry forth the message of God's kingdom. So thank you for your work in that. Is there anything else you want to put in here before we wrap up this conversation?
I would love to see this course be a blessing to people and to be a
Hmm.
help and an encouragement. And that's my prayer. That's my goal as this course
Hmm.
is used, that for each of you listening, each group, each whoever that uses any of these courses, that it could
Hmm.
be a blessing and encouragement and an assistance to you.
Hmm. Thank you, Craig. So, yes, for those who are listening here, you can either go to the description here on the video and get a link to our website where you can look at these books. We actually have some partial PDF of the book on our website. You can kind of look at it a little closer. You can also call us. So, our phone number here for Salt Books, which really is strength to strength is shipping these books for Salt. The phone number for us is 413-530-1320. That's 413-530-1320. Or you can email us at contact@saltbooks.org. And then also, as the website is saltbooks.org, and you can order there, call us, get more information. We'll be happy to talk with you. So thanks for listening. And again, Craig, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.